Okay, so we are live. So, hello everyone. Welcome to this Awakening Summit. Fourth day has been incredible. My name is Hollis Citron, CEO and founder of I Am Creative, and I am so happy that I get to meet and speak to Diana Beaulieu. And Diana, thank you. I said I'm sorry if I kill your name because it's so beautiful, and I'm from the East Coast. So, um, welcome to the space.
Thank you, Hollis. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for welcoming me in and pronouncing my name perfectly.
Thank you. So, I am going to say a little bit about you, and then we're going to dive into the conversation. So, Diana is a womb awakener. She awakens your womb wisdom. She is a teacher um, of modern medicine, and she has opened her own school, which is pretty incredible, in 2015 called the Womb Mystery School. Since opening the school, she has helped hundreds of women around the world connect to their womb wisdom, and she has trained women on 3 continents to become womb awakening practitioners. So cool. They have gone on to share womb awakening and womb wisdom teachings in over 15 countries. Whew. So let's dive into all of this. So, womb wisdom, and the womb is a space to awaken this divine feminine and bring in this divine masculine. This is such an incredible topic. And I would love for you to share your story and your views. Um, we talked about like from your these toxic relationships from the past. Like, fill me in. Tell us about this.
Sure. So thank you, Hollis, for introducing my work. And yeah, what I wanted to share about my work, because there are many aspects to womb awakening work. It's a very diverse body of work. And so it would be beyond the kind of scope of this interview to talk about everything, which is why I wanted to kind of drill down into a certain aspect. So in my book, I talk a lot about in the book that we've shared, but I talk a lot about um, how we can awaken some kind of intuition from the womb to guide us. And so my book chapter is all about that. And so I don't really want to talk about that too much because it's kind of outlined there in the book chapter. What I wanted to talk about was this other aspect of womb awakening work, which is how we attract in relationships. And so that's specifically sexual relationships or love relationships, romantic relationships, and how womb awakening can help you to transform your experience of that. So, my backstory is that I had a kind of a tough time as a younger woman because without actually really remembering it, I'd been sexually abused. And so I had a lot of fear and a lot of confusion in my system. And it was very, very difficult for me to have intimacy with other people. I was very kind of closed over. And I also had a really poor relationship with my body, with my sense of who I was. Um, and I found that I was always attracting relationships where I just didn't feel love and connection, really. And of course, that was because I didn't feel love and connection with myself, because that's where you have to start. And I went on a quite a long journey for about 20 years through energy medicine, shamanic work, really trying to heal myself, trying to find answers. And after the first 15 years of that journey, I still felt like I hadn't really come to terms with really the core of who I was and why I didn't feel a full sense of self-love and why I wasn't really attracting kind of deeply loving and lasting relationships. And at this point, my childhood sexual abuse memories came up. I was 40. I'm 45 now. So it was 5 years ago, and it came up as a kind of like a shocking blast of memories of things I'd kind of wondered about, but then became really clear and obvious as soon as the memories really unfolded. And what I didn't realize at the time was that I was actually awakening my womb. My womb was the organ in my body where I'd held these memories. This is where they were stored. It was like this kind of Pandora's box. And when my womb kind of woke up, she started releasing all of these memories, along with a lot of emotions, fear and shame and guilt and rage. And I went through quite a rough, heavy process of dealing with all of this kind of previously suppressed information that was in my womb. And concurrently to that, simultaneously to that, I received these very strong downloads that as I was going through this process, I was meant to teach about it. I was meant to hold space with women. And so I had this weird, like 3 years of my life where on, 2 days a week, I might be lying in bed shaking and crying. And then on the weekend, I'd be teaching a workshop to women about how they could really energetically start opening up the womb.
So you were literally going through this. I mean, this
Like,
was like
literally going through this in real time and then sharing this with other women.
yeah.
As this happened, the work kept evolving, and it became, like this 5-day workshop that I do with women, and women were like so amazed that they'd never considered their womb, they'd never put healing light into their womb. They were amazed at the kind of memories that were coming up for them, the emotions that were coming up for them. And, many of them were realizing that they too had all sorts of degrees of sexual trauma. So of course that's a spectrum for all of us, ranging from kind of serious stuff like happened to me as a kid, but also many, many of us women have a traumatic sexual experience at some point, or an overall feeling that sex isn't loving and we don't feel fully safe in our bodies and we don't feel fully met by our partners. It's all a spectrum. And so I began to get this kind of insight that the womb, by holding on to these memories, kind of traps you in this kind of toxified state. So if you're holding inside you these imprints of having been raped or having had an unloving sexual encounter, you kind of get frozen in that state within your body. And it can be quite hard to move on from it. So you might do like counseling work, which is very head, you might do some meditation in your heart. But until you really get down into the womb, you're not shifting the fundamental energies that are causing you to, let's say, be stuck in a kind of fearful or closed down or limited state where you keep perhaps attracting then the same kind of energies all again and again and again. So the trauma imprints in your womb are then magnetizing more trauma or more of the same. And because we're not fully embodied, most of us, we're kind of very much in our heads in our culture, and often we're just avoiding what's really happening in our bodies. We don't get to that place. And it took me 15 years of therapeutic work to be ready to get to that place. It was a big deal to arrive there. And as I was doing all these energetic clearings, very intentional energetic clearings on my womb, I was realizing that my load was lightening. I was releasing trauma imprints. I was releasing old memories. And, there were things around my father and my ancestral line and, as well as the early childhood sexual abuse, kind of things I'd experienced as an adult as well, certain patterns that had kind of arrived into my being through sexual relationships. And as I was shedding these layers, I realized that I was starting to connect much more with a divine masculine energy inside me. So it's as if my womb had been holding all these imprints of like distorted, old masculine energy, these memories of men who were, for their reasons, it's no blame, and I don't feel a victim of this, were unable to bring love into my body sexually. And then I started really, as I say, just connecting kind of intuitively with this essence of like, what is the divine masculine then? What is that? And how can I bring that into my body? And so I started teaching about bringing in divine masculine healing light right into the womb space as this kind of template for how we might start on a vibrational level to hold a code that would then attract in and magnetize in far higher vibration men, either men who were already kind of emotionally and sexually loving and healthy, or who'd done their work, who'd really come to the point where they'd also done their work and were able to hold that loving space. At the same time, I felt that what I was also doing was healing my feminine codes inside my womb. And instead of showing up as a woman who was all closed down and not really available and not really able to trust the masculine, I was also opening up my feminine, my divine feminine energy in the womb and starting to kind of broadcast the information of, I love myself and I trust myself and I am able to really let somebody in. And I've now released the past, which made me so distrustful and closed and afraid. And I now hold an energy of love in my womb. And so these were things that were happening at this deep magnetic, electrical level in the womb, very, very, very deep, really very far away from the rational mind, from the rational thinking mind. It was all happening intuitively. And then the process was happening energetically, but also physically in my body. There was a lot of clearing. There was a lot of transformation. And as I went on, built my school, and went on to train practitioners, I felt really strongly that the culmination of doing this kind of work, of releasing the old traumas, the next logical step to this would be that I would be, as a woman, ready to enter into a very different frequency of sexual relationship, which I'm calling a divine relationship. But we can also call it a conscious relationship, or a multi-dimensional relationship, between two people who are very aware spiritually and who are able to really evolve on a journey of love together. And I found myself just wanting to kind of purify more and more these two essences inside me, the divine feminine, like what is that? What is that to show up in the world as a woman, broadcasting the divine feminine light with all of that love and compassion and safety? Yeah. And what is it like to also really hold these codes of the divine masculine as this beautiful, loving, healing frequency of light? And what kind of person am I going to attract into my life as a result of this? And so I also started teaching, a course called Ready for Divine Love, which was also all about this. It was like, well, once we've moved beyond the healing, we need to now get ready to magnetize a really conscious relationship based on two people who've done their work and who now have a very purified essence within them sexually, and therefore are able to come together and really create something new. And that's a lot to do with birthing the new earth, actually.
Yeah, exactly. It's this whole awakening.
Yes.
My cat, I'm sorry. He's about to pull a piece of glass off the table. I apologize. Go ahead. So we're awakening.
So I felt like this would be one of the ways, because people can birth many things into the new earth on their own. It's not like you have to be in a relationship to do that, obviously. But it felt to me it was important that there would be like divine relationships happening in the world where conscious couples were coming together and creating something new, whatever that was. Maybe it's a joint purpose. Maybe it's a family, of children who were really nurtured and loved.
Right.
It doesn't matter, but really coming in and consciously seeding new templates, new information, new creations into the world. And so that's been like the last leg of my journey, is really attracting a man who is my partner, who really does have those divine masculine codes and has done his corresponding, 20 or more years of his work to be ready to really come into that frequency.
And have you found him?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. So as you're talking about the masculine, I just have a question about, usually when we think of masculine, when you're using the word masculine, it's kind of like this control. It's this kind of like heavy-handed kind of, I'm in power, I'm strong, but you're not coming at it from that point of view.
No, that's right, because the problem for all of us is that we live in a world where the genders are very distorted.
Yeah. So
when we typically think of the feminine, we're thinking of a distorted version of that. When we're thinking about the masculine, we're thinking about the men we know or who brought us up. And often it's very typically distorted in different ways. Maybe the men we know are very collapsed and they're not masculine enough. Maybe they're overly tyrannical with their energy or overly forceful with their energy, and they're not in the center. And so for me, the masculine really is kind of like the directed life force.
Yeah. So it's direct.
We all have masculine energy. We all need it. You couldn't possibly have seeded your business without masculine energy, because you would just still be sitting there kind of imagining it and thinking that it's a wonderful thing to do. You need masculine energy to impulse you.
Right. It's that balance.
It's the balance. So like we can think of the feminine as the knowing and the wisdom and the love. Very much to do with like intuition and truth and emotional clarity.
Yeah.
And then with the masculine, it's about action. It's about, the impulse, the drive, the materialization of things. And so we need both. And it feels to me that, in my experiences of when I've connected with this divine masculine light, it hasn't at all felt aggressive. It's felt healing, it's felt penetrating, it's felt very conscious, but it's also felt very gentle.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, it's when you were just talking about that whole the whole gender thing, and how as a society how it's looked upon as that person is, so masculine, and so like it's a negative thing, and it's not.
Yes, exactly.
It's that balance. Yeah.
Exactly. So this work, it's a really good point that you have there about seeing masculine as a negative thing, because many women, I feel that because we've kind of been collectively traumatized over many millennia, and collectively we tend to have a negative masculine, point of view around the masculine, or we feel ourselves victimized by the masculine, or kind of, like they've kind of squashed us down and we've had to fight up again.
Right.
And I just feel like now is a time for us to kind of drop those old stories, to also understand that men have been very, very wounded and distorted by our society and by our world as well. Men have been enslaved, men have been co-opted, men have been, suppressed. They've had their sovereignty taken away from them. A man who is a wage slave and who is just kind of bringing home, money every week to put food on the table is basically a slave. He's not in his own free will. We live in a slavery-driven society.
That is so
And,
perfect. So true.
and none of that is good for men. Men want to feel their power and their sovereignty. And so we live in a world where men have been very damaged by the way that society is structured, just like women have. And even though we call it patriarchy, we can make the mistake of feeling like that means that men have a better time of it. Perhaps because at some point they've had more legal rights, or they've had rights over women. But actually in their core, in their emotional core, they're wounded. And we know that, we feel it.
Right. Wow, it's so powerful. It's like I'm just thinking of like that womb, that center, that holder. Like I love how you say like it's so much like we spend so much time here, and so here at our center, at our core, we don't spend a lot of time. And I'm also thinking here we're talking about men and women, but I'm sorry, I can't help but think about like when you're birthing, like we were all birthed from this point. We were all birthed from this womb. It's just such a powerful concept of it's where we come from, and it's where we really live. It's where so much is held, but we don't give it a lot of acknowledgement.
Yes, that's it. You have it in a nutshell. That's why it's so important. And as carriers of the divine feminine, when we really work on the womb space, it becomes this beautiful, loving, flowing, crystalline container that so many ideas can come through. So, there's a whole area around womb work which is about creativity and birthing creativity. But it's also like a place where we can embody the divine mother as well. Because, this is the portal of life, and therefore carries the frequency of the divine mother. And when we're in relationship with men, we can offer that space also as a space of healing for men. Because one of the wounds that men have is that they feel cut off from divinity. They feel cut off from any aspect of their own kind of sacredness, and the fact that they belong to some greater spiritual reality. And as women, we have the opportunity to really embody the divine mother through the womb, and really kind of flow with that unconditional love and that unconditional sense of, if anyone who was born through a woman's womb is a child of the goddess, and therefore is loved and therefore is worthy. And I feel that in their core, so many men need to hear that as part of their own healing process. They need to hear that they were born from the goddess and they are worthy. They're the sons of divinity.
Right.
And we are the portals of that.
Like I'm just kind of like taking it all in. It's such a strong concept. And I mean, men have their own. I mean, men have their womb per se. Would you say that?
Yes, absolutely. So men have an energetic space. So in some circles, people call it the hara, which is a Chinese term for this kind of lower belly area, and it's very, very important in Chinese and Japanese energy work. And I feel that men can do a lot of their own womb healing as well. So for a man to do his work, he needs to release imprints in his male womb, his masculine womb. He needs to release like all the memories of his ancestors who were sent off to battle or who were imprisoned or who were enslaved or who were never able to express emotions, or all of those things that we know that men have been through. He also has to kind of own and release his emotional residues of his own life, so that he's really purified that part of him, so that when he does bring his light into the woman and into her womb, it's just this pure light, this really pure light of love. And that's when sexuality becomes like a healing modality between men and women. And so, yes, women have their part to play, and men so much as well
Right.
in doing that work.
So how does a man release that? And how does a woman release that? Is it the same? Same
I think
process?
in the essence, it can be the same process. And the way I work, and everybody's, who does womb modalities, there are a lot of different womb modalities in the world. And
Yeah.
so the way I look at it is that it's all about healing intention. So when you become aware of a layer inside you, so let's say you kind of become aware, wow, I've got a real rage layer, I need to address this. Then the beginning of healing is when you really set a sacred intention for that to be transformed. And because we're sovereign beings, when we set an intention, that's like a command, right?
Right.
It's like a command to our own bodies and to the universe at large. So we can set a really clear intention. I'm going to clear and I'm going to transform this layer inside me. And then the way I work is that I really call on like light frequency, healing light, just come into my body with the express purpose of meeting my intention of clearing that anger layer, for example. And then I let that magic work. So once the light is in my body, it's coming into my body at an energetic level. It's also coming into my body at a physical level, at an organ level. It's coming into the DNA, it's coming into the blood, it's coming into the fluids of my body. And that process begins a clearing. And so that clearing for some people might be very smooth. Buff, the anger's gone. For me, for example, it ain't like that.
Wasn't like, oh, that was easy.
Oh, that was easy, yeah. And if that's how it is for you, then congratulations, and you're probably an enlightened being already. Well done. And but for me, it's more like then there's a journey. Sometimes I need to give voice to that rage, or journal, or I might have a physical detox, as that's physically coming out of my body. I might be in bed for half a day feeling really exhausted because that energy is leaving my body at a subtle level. And I might need to visit where that rage came from and, really explore that. But eventually those layers soften. And that's the whole thing, is that when you give it time and when you give it dedication, these layers within us begin to soften. And then this entire matrix of our energy system really purifies. And it's not an easy journey. It goes in layers. You start with the most obvious layers, and then you go in and in and in until you find the deeper layers. And of course, I'm still on that journey.
I mean, we're all on the journey, right?
We're all on the journey. It's certainly not over for me. I'm still learning more and seeing more about myself, which needs clearing.
I like when you were talking about like setting the intention, because I think it's a common thing for people who are just kind of jumping into this, any kind of world, even like when you're thinking of something, it's like, okay, I want this in particular. And then something comes in and says, well, do you really want this? Well, maybe you want this. and then you kind of start having this like argument in your head. And then it's just kind of like, what is going on?
Yeah. Clear intention is very important. So I work a lot with helping people set intention and holding it,
And I like that idea of just bringing attention to, of like that whole detox concept. how it looks different for people in different ways, and how it can manifest in these physical ways.
Yes.
Because often it can get a little, you're just kind of like, oh my God, I really don't feel good. And then that fear kind of starts to kick in. But when you get to that higher level of awakening and understanding that you are releasing, it's pretty incredible.
It's true. It's true. And you're right that fear can come in because sometimes it makes you feel like you've got a virus or a flu. You know, you're like, you have all these symptoms and, you know, you're feeling feverish or you're feeling cold or achy. And actually, you're going through an energy clearing and you need to just like drink a lot of water and fluids and rest a lot and it will pass. But, you know, yes, our bodies are going through a lot. We really need to support our bodies at this time because whether or not we're doing sacred womb awakening practices, we're in a big collective clearing anyway. It's
Right.
happening collectively.
Right.
And we really need to support ourselves through that so much and just kind of relax into it a little bit as well. Trust it more, trust our bodies. You know, I think it's really, really important that we trust our bodies and that we don't think our bodies are weak or defective because they are going through all of these symptoms.
Right. Right. This whole kind of getting comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, that's definitely not. It needs mastering.
Like to say. So yeah, so we're getting to the end of our time, but I would love for you to share how people can connect with you and find out more about your wonderful teachings.
Sure. Well, you can visit my website at sacredwomanawakening.com. And there you can find out about my practitioner course. And I also have an 8-week online womb awakening course that you can take. And I also have some free gifts. And I think the one I want to mention is my 4-part video course. And it's called 8 Steps from Wounded Woman to Whole Woman. And there I talk about all the steps of womb awakening that you can take as a journey in order to really go from wherever you might be starting in your life to having this much more healed and transparently crystalline feminine energy in your womb and then able to create and attract and manifest in a whole new way.
Yeah. 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 So beautiful. And I love how you're talking about bringing consciousness, this whole awaken the divine, awaken the that divine feminine and the divine masculine, and creating those relationships. So important anytime, and especially now this awakening is huge.
Yes, it is.
It is just like in your face huge. So Diana, I am so grateful for you joining and everybody else who joined along. And if you could please put your information in the chat box, that would be wonderful, just so people see everything and can find you easily. I would love for them to be able to connect with you. And everybody, and Diana, I apologize for the cat interruption in the beginning. If that threw you off, I apologize. Just had to acknowledge that. But everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and continue enjoying this summit. So many amazing, wonderful people to meet and hear from and be inspired by.
Thank you, Hollis.
Yeah, thank you so much, and have a good day in the world wherever you are. Okay, take care.